Taula 08. Con Denise Araouzou y Mayssa Fattouh.
El barrio ha pasado de ser un barrio de pescadores, de portuarios, de buen ambiente,
a un barrio de escándalo y de maravilla.
Acabamos de escuchar el homenaje a los pescadores, al puerto, al barrio de Barceloneta. Son unas grabaciones y montaje de Hilaria Sartori. Esto es Taula 08 y yo soy Violeta Ospina y estamos en un programa de Jiser. Estoy aquí con Xavi de Luca, que va a introducir a los personajes de esta taula, y también estamos escuchando al mismo tiempo un fan que nos quiere mucho. It's a fan that like us so much. It's a character also from this taula.
Hola Violeta, buenas tardes.
Buenas tardes, ¿cómo estás?
Además del fan de este ventilador que nos va a acompañar para ayudar a llevar mejor este calor que estamos pasando, es un gusto arrancar la Taula 08 con estas invitadas, con Mayssa Fattouh y Denise Araouzou, que nos acompañan juntamente con Tony Coates, y con los que hoy vamos a lanzar temas. Vamos partiendo de una temática muy próxima, muy compartida entre las realidades de las ciudades que habitamos o que hemos habitado en algún momento. Barcelona, Limassol en Chipre, en el caso de Denise, y Beirut, en el caso de Mayssa. Vamos a intentar, a través de documentos sonoros, trazar ideas y compartirlas y ver dónde nos llevan, ¿no?, estos caminos abiertos. Es un programa que vamos a hacer en inglés, porque es una lengua común que compartimos. Será más fácil también comunicar y expresar diferentes cosas para las invitadas, y para nosotros no es un problema, pero bueno, es un hecho y también es importante mencionarlo. Denise y Mayssa son comisàries independientes, trabajan en diferentes proyectos desde hace algunos años, y queríamos invitarlas a venir a una taula conjunta, trazando un marco conceptual decidido entre todos, porque trabajan sus trabajos de investigación nos parecen interesantes. Además, es curioso que las dos se hayan instalado en Barcelona, Denise en el último año y Mayssa desde hace 3, que nos acompañan en Barcelona. No nos conocíamos mucho y creíamos que era una buena ocasión para conocerlas mejor a ellas y conocer los proyectos en los que están trabajando. Entonces, no me voy a extender mucho más y voy a pasarle la palabra a ellas. Hello, good afternoon, and
hi,
you can
everyone.
present Denise if you want shortly. Or
Sure. Thank you guys for having me here. It's a really great opportunity to come together and just exchange views about Barcelona as a city, as a cultural city, and as a city with a really interesting history, which is one of the things that drew me here. When I decided to move to Barcelona, I contacted Juan Canela, who is running Bar Project here, and I asked him to give me some advice on what to expect, let's say. And at the time, I was also developing a project in Cyprus, a research project that had to do with, let's say, I was trying to discover the connections between architecture and specifically what we could call corporate architecture, which is characteristic of luxury, high-end and high-rise development projects the connection from this type of architecture to the debt of the country and to the manufacture of desire. And one of the instigators of this kind of growth and development is gentrification, or one of the results. And Barcelona itself is suffering from a form of gentrification. And aside from that, Barcelona has a very interesting architectural landscape. So I came here to Barcelona in April to do a residency at Bar Project to develop this research, and I'll be presenting it. I'll be presenting my findings later after the summer. And it's all very, very interesting how things can be connected between these two cities, and also between Beirut.
Yeah, indeed. The choice of Barcelona was also due to the shore and to the sea. So it's very interesting for me to be invited to this table, and thank you very much for that, Xavi.
You're welcome.
And Taula. Because, so far I have to admit that I've only lived in cities by the sea. And perhaps it is a sort of a nostalgia to where I come from in Beirut. But also it is interesting to see how such cities have developed since the year 2000 up to today, in terms of also gentrification. I had lived in Dubai, in Bahrain, Manama, and Doha, and my move here was more of a lifestyle change, but also very attached to the fact that the sea is a presence. So to be living in a city like Barcelona that is quite close to the sea, but somehow feels like it turns its back, reminds me as well of how Beirut is kind of turning its back to the sea and developing a real wall between the sea and the city, as a sort of a refuge or a sort of a protection from the sea. And it takes us back to a lot of older history of why we do so, but this one is quite different, but the pattern is similar at the same time. I have no research that is ongoing about this topic, but the idea of coastal cities and walking in coastal cities is something that really interests me. And I had worked on a project with Mathaf in Doha, which was called the Walk Around the Studio, that really embraces the idea of inefficiency as a way of living and a way of resistance in living.
It's funny you say that, because I found Barcelona to be very pedestrian friendly, whereas Limassol is quite impossible to walk from. Let's say if you would like to move along the coast, you can certainly do so, because there's now a beautiful in parts beautiful walkway that connects the whole coast of Limassol, but in itself the city is very difficult for the pedestrian. So the public space, let's say, is preoccupied by mainly streets and cars. And I think that says a lot about how not only how the citizens respond to their city, but also how their city affects their relationship to one another. So Barcelona for me was I had been here before, and I always had in mind that it's a very, not only a very beautiful city, but also a very easy city for the pedestrian, and that says a lot. For example, the various developments in Eixample and now in San Antonio, actually, around where I live, is to transform the areas between, let's say, the blocks of houses into pedestrian zones. So people can go there and sit, they can have a picnic, and I just like this idea that you allow the pedestrian to coexist, let's say, to be in the public space. Interestingly, in Limassol, the pedestrian walkway was a result of some issues that the coaches were facing in the 19th century already, when there was there was trade in Limassol, and when the British arrived and the trade increased, the locals would complain about the difficulties of coaches being, to move because the sea would come up so high. So they started creating this walkway where they would plant eucalyptus trees and pine trees, and slowly this walkway started to form, and it wasn't for leisure, it was for trade. Similarly, how Barcelona and its own relationship to the coast functioned. Later on in the 70s, well, actually before that, the first bar on the beach or on the coast of Limassol came about because a sailor decided that he wanted to stay by the beach and anchor there, but he didn't want to leave the sea as a site, and he wanted to maintain his connection, let's say, to the sea. So he built this little bar called Acteon, and this is how the culture of little bars along the coast started to form. And now it's littered, I would say, by hotels and high-rises, and it's definitely becoming a city that wants to resemble cities like Beirut or Dubai, or some have said that it wants to resemble Marseille. It's a city that is trying to find its own, I think, and in the process may have lost its character, I would say. But in any case, there's a lot of new, shiny buildings on the coast of Limassol.
You have bring something to listen to about Limassol, of how that,
yes.
Is that okay?
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's
I
hear
have
it.
the information, so let's hear it.
Mm-hmm.
And I would like to listen also to Maissa's
Mm-hmm.
thoughts, and also to Tony's and Chavis, where are the locals, to think about these three connections with the past and the future of being in front of the sea.
Mm-hmm. So this album is very fittingly called Hawaii Press, It's a work by Panayotis, produced by Nes Electronics, which is a local Cypriot record label. And I wanted to show you or share this with you because I think it perfectly grasps the idea of Cyprus. I mean, he also very fittingly called it Hawaii-press because we are an island that is mostly touristic, or most of our cities have many things to offer in terms of sites, in terms of entertainment and leisure for tourists. But in terms of nature, I think this is something that we locals value a lot, is the natural elements and the sea and the mountains and the rocks and the gorges and all that. And every song in this album is named by for a different location. And I really like the way that he describes in the description of the album. It says the alleged recordings of a mysterious stranger who visited and tried to integrate into the community. And I think it's just for Cyprus being in the middle of 3 continents, telling.
Do you think there will be links between these Cyprus and the situation that we might be living here in Barcelona, also to the way or how gentrification is affecting or this shape that Western ways of consuming are being implemented in the cities, the coastal cities in the Mediterranean, all abroad. We are seeing the effects, how the leisure is conceived, how the access to culture is conceived, why Barcelona is fitting in this shape that is ready-made. We know very well the shape, and we could copy-paste it in other places. So
you say ready-made, and I think the word ready-made hints at the beach of Barcelona, which is in a way a ready-made because it's all fake. And it was produced, or let's say created, mainly for the Olympics that took place in 1992, and before that it was a site mostly for industrial use. The waters were very polluted as well. So I think the creation of an ideal holiday location is something that Cyprus is also betting on, because we are an island, and as I said, beautiful island that has a lot to offer in terms of nature. The locals are definitely capitalizing on that. That is to say, development can be good, but if it's done in a very short-sighted manner, a very aggressive manner towards not only the environment but its inhabitants as well, it can be quite destructive when you only have the foreigner in mind, only the tourist in mind, the foreign investor in mind. And it's just, as a cultural practitioner in Limassol, when I was living there last year, it was worrying to see how much of a priority it was to construct these skyscrapers, because we're talking about buildings that are 30 plus floors. All in all, in Cyprus, the government has approved 60 high-rise buildings. Most of them are in Limassol. Let me see. So 60 are under construction. And I'm not sure if the infrastructure is ready to receive so many high-rise buildings. And this wall that also Mayssa was referring to between the inner city and the front, the shore, where, this is actually supposed to be a public space and not a private space, but we see this phenomenon also where beaches are being privatized by specific cafes or restaurants, and they're only available to people who can pay 10 euros a sunbed, which is a bit absurd. It just creates a very fake world at the end of the day, which is not something that the tourists are looking for. Ironically enough, the tourists are looking for something that they can understand as authentic, the authentic experience. And I think this illusion is going to burst, of the illusion of development, the illusion of the perfect holiday destination.
Yeah, I think I also have this very much reminds me of this sort of hype of the and unfortunately the danger of soi-disant authenticity, where models of older relics and architecture are not renovated but actually torn down and replicated, and that is quite usual and common in the Gulf, where it takes different examples from different cities to give them an authentic local look that would attract tourists. But in terms of Beirut, and to go back to what I was talking about, that sort of a wall between the sea and the city. Now the Corniche, the sea promenade, which is one of the very few areas where one can still walk, is populated by people who are really truly hungry for a public space, and we're talking about a city that really does not offer that. So the walkers are facing another Beirut, which is a Beirut of high-rise, super luxury high-rise that no one can truly afford except if you're part of the diaspora or an Arab emir, or and it creates us real anxiety and actually schizophrenia between the citizens of Beirut and the topography and the image of that Beirut has created for itself the past 20 years, I would say. I mean, and post-war. But there's also lots of acts of resistance and resilience, and the last attempt was to stop from yet again nibbling on the public beach. And the public beach was not man-made, it's completely natural, but Beirut and Lebanon unfortunately has sold its coast to private owners. And here lots of, in fact, artists and cultural practitioners and activists have stood up against the construction of yet another hotel, and so far it's on hold. But it's super. I mean, this can turn very quickly. This decision can turn super quickly. One of the artists, Lebanese artists, has also portrayed this persistence and resilience. Her name is Munira Al-Salah, and the work that she had that is still ongoing, actually it's an ongoing project, it's called The Sea is a Stereo, and comes under the form of video, photography, narratives, and it shows that perhaps the last remaining generation of swimmers from the public beach, and how they would be there, be it rain or shine, all year long, to try and claim back that public space, which is the sea, but that looks more and more unattainable.
You have shared with us an audio, but it's not about this artist, but we Ode to the Sea. It's the listening week. We have talked about tourism, touristification, also the idealization of this space in front of the sea, but we are cultural practitioners, artists, and we are worried about cultural approach. So how the city is built the cultural city and the arts and cultural is built around the sea, or it is not. So let's think about these three cities in that case, and let's listen this that Mayssa after will tell us what it's about.
This is an excerpt from a live performance that was done on the occasion of the first week of Sound in Lebanon in May, which was an initiative and a collaboration with the AUB Neighborhood Initiative. So the performance is done by sound artists and musicians, and the mix of improvisation. It's about how we can see the sea's relationship to the city and how we can understand it, and the questions such as is the sea's shoreline moving away from the city's mainland? Because for Beirut, the Mediterranean has been an integral part of its history and legend. However, in the last few years, the urban development has been really, as I said, developing these concrete barriers, these walls between the urban sphere and the seawater. So it's the listening and viewing of the sea has been restricted, actually, due to the multi-storied building constructions across the Corniche area. And it's a way to claim back the presence of the sea within the city, and giving it back a bit of space and reflection.
Nice, thank you. So Tony is he wants to talk. What do you want to say, Tony? I'm
Thank
sorry.
you, Violeta.
I didn't see your eyes trying to eat the
I can
microphone.
eat my mic. Yes, I would like to talk a bit about Barcelona. So I think you are right when you say Barcelona is being more or less gentrified through the last, let's say, 20 years. But also there's always been borders in the city. So borders in the way that if you think about Diagonal, this big street crossing Barcelona, and then you see the seafront, you will see that some people, they don't cross the borders up or down, and even to come to the downtown, the old part of the city, many people, they don't even think about it. So when you talk about Raval or Ciutat Vella, or you talk about Barceloneta, even Poble Nou, or you talk about Poble Sec, there are some places that they're not crossed. So it's interesting because slowly all this way that tourism has been also merging more and more everywhere. They also block any access to these public places that were before any place to go and wander and move around. Now it's more and more confined to certain places. So more and more is like when they did the Mercat San Antonio, where you live now, they already were mentioning that in a few years this will be a hipster area, and it has become. And so, I mean, I don't mean now that many people are leaving these places, but slowly the prices are getting up and people are leaving, and I don't think locals are looking at it's the opposite. Locals are moving somewhere else out of
Outside
Barcelona.
Yeah.
So these things are, I know you're aware about it, but this has been a phenomena through generations. So before the sea was not part of the city, now the sea is part of the city, but it's not. It's not privatized like private beaches as it is in Lebanon. But slowly, we don't go to these places.
Totally, and I think it is privatized, in fact, because it turns into a monetary thing for the sake of tourism. So in that sense, it is somewhat privatized.
But it's very interesting because about being authentic, what it means to be authentic now, how you look at the city. And I think the pattern is repeating itself more and more often everywhere. I mean, you see this pattern being more and more repeated, where you are excluding the locals and more giving access to everyone. But these people coming from abroad, they are trying to look for people who also have their own way of dwelling, doing, building, living. And it's very difficult. It's because we also look for comfort when we go to other cities, and we move with our own way of understanding what we need.
I think this has to do also with this. How do we prepare the programs of the cultural centers? No, if we want to go in depth in this cultural sphere that is closer to our practitioner, to our practices, is interesting what you said, Denise, just before, that you assist to a conference in a cultural center and some tourists ask to the conference, no? And it's interesting to see how the access to culture is switching in something else that is not only the culture prepared and directed to locals, but also preparing programs specifically for the audience that comes from abroad.
Yeah, I was very pleasantly surprised at this conference or this lecture that the theorist Henry Giroux gave at the CCCB, which CCCB is right next to Macba, behind La Virreina. So it's in an area where there are Barcelona's biggest, most well-known institutions. So after the conference, there was a Q&A, and a teacher spoke, and he was from the United States. And I just thought, that looks like healthy tourism, if you would call it that, because at the end of the day, if I think about Barcelona and Limassol, there is more being done in Barcelona on behalf of the mayor in terms of improving the life quality of the locals. However, at the same time, maintaining an influx of tourism, because truth be told, it's one of the main incomes of the state of Catalonia. Tourism in general, Spain, it's a tourism haven. So it's again about finding a balance between the two, about fostering healthy forms of tourism and allowing this cross-pollination of cultures, because tourism can offer something in return that is not just pollution and littering and noise pollution. So talking of healthy tourism, or let's say trying to engage tourism in the cultural activities of the city, in Limassol, I was working at a non-profit exhibition space called the Island Club, founded by Cypriot artist Christodoulos Panagiotou, and the space was opened in one of the first malls of Limassol, which opened in the 70s, And it's quite a decadent space. Many of the shop fronts were left abandoned for many years. And slowly, local businesses and entrepreneurs are coming back to this mall and opening up their own offices. And this mall is found in the old parts of the town, where most of the tourists walk around. And so we of course we have people, locals who came to the shows, but we also had tourists who were coming by and were pleasantly surprised. And Limassol as a city has I would say 4 or 5 more art spaces, the majority of which are in the old town. Just because that's where most of the pedestrians are. And I mean, proximity to the sea is important in Limassol as well. It's clearly a benefit to have something close to the sea, but not right on the sea, because that becomes all the more too expensive.
Yeah, I think it's also interesting to note the sort of inclusion that you're referring to for the tourists, but also another kind of exclusion for independent art spaces and smaller art institutions and or more artist-run spaces. And that you would find that these cultural supposed havens that you were talking about, the Sicily or Macba or Santa Monica, are quite nicely located for the tourists. But then the more research-based are not on the tourist path, and they're not indicated. And to me, they also give another reality of the city, which is kind of really not accessible and not visible for the tourists. So yes, what kind of programming are we offering to these different audiences in these larger institutions? I think this is also something that is worth noting and reflecting on. But I would say that it is nearly inconceivable for Beirut, for instance, to think of of an art space or an artist-run space that is close to the sea. It's just not going to happen.
Wow.
The real estate is too expensive.
Well, I mean, Santa Monica belongs to the church, so the Generalitat pays huge amounts of money in order to rent it. Macba has a foundation, and the patrons are one of the largest families with money in Barcelona, Catalunya. And CCCB is Diputació. Diputació is one of the few institutions in Spain that still remains for culture without... They do what they want with their own budgets. So they're not depending on a specific government, Madrid or government Catalan, but they have their own policies, and so there are a lobby, and many people are working there for decades, and they are just functionaries. So it's like, you see, all what you see has, another story, layers of story, not just story. I mean, many interests. And when you say tourism is part of what is our life in Catalonia, I would say yes and not. I mean, this is because now it's a lot of interest, but Catalonia has been surviving for a long time as a culture, and tourism was something coming erratically, and I think, and they were having many other income, and suddenly, I mean, for me, the pity was when Barcelona became another Lloret de Mar or Tossa or whatever. And although there are many other things happening that are not visible, And I think this is what it is the cut, because then when the tourism is all year long coming,
yes, that's
many things become invisible and they're not merged. And this is part of the problem.
Yeah, it's also cultural tourism.
Yeah,
how much it's part of the GDP and
this is. Yeah, I mean, I've been talking just about the tourism is sometimes is important. Of course, it's also opening up minds, and I mean, during the Franco time, it opened a lot of changes and brought some changes finally in the 60s. But now it's also bringing a lot of other...
it can be destructive if it's all year round, if it's doesn't respect the locals. And one thing that I admire from the Catalans is that their identity is not easily washed off, from tourism. Because islands, especially Cyprus and other islands, are more... susceptible to having their national identity washed down after not just decades of tourism, but also centuries of being in various hands, various colonizers, various masters.
But it's interesting you say, because in fact, if you go now to Menorca, or Mallorca, especially Menorca, you will find many more people from Barcelona now as tourists in Menorca. And also in the Ampurdà, you go just a bit Costa Brava, and many people have a second residence, or they go and rent houses there because they just leave Barcelona, and whenever they can, they leave Barcelona because for them, this is what is happening. I mean, they don't feel excluded; they have an alternative. But people who are part of these neighborhoods that we all like Poble Sec, Poble Nou. These people cannot leave, but they have to assume and they have to take on all this massive tourism.
I think the first audio we said, the first audio about Barceloneta was on the. You could hear this man saying that at the beginning the neighborhood was for els pescadors, the fishermen, and now it's a mess. It's completely a mess.
Yeah, but I think therefore borders, many times borders get larger, so you can go and say, okay, Barcelona, but it's not just Barcelona. And then you have Ampurdà, and then you have Menorca, and sometimes Mallorca. So we go also to other islands.
Yes.
But at the same time, or you reduce it because then other people, they build their own whatever in order to resist. Interesting.
Also interesting was the start of our conversation before we were on air, and so why do we leave such spaces as cultural practitioners? If what are the real issues in the cultural sphere, despite the lifestyle that is quite positive in terms of creating new imaginaries and standards of living that are encouraging, and but maybe this is for another Taula.
We should meet again in some months maybe and reflect about this question. I mean, it can resume why we are here in Barcelona right now, working in cultural practices,
push us out.
And why we keep going on trying to develop projects and exhibitions and exchanges.
Absolutely.
And why here and why not on the rural or in smaller spaces not by the sea.
Yes,
but I think it's something nostalgic. We were talking about this before. We are getting the studies on the north, but we don't want to leave the.
Our heart is
in
the
south.
Yes, the heart is in the south. Well, actually, I came across a very interesting oral history project that was conducted by Dr. Nicoleta Christodoulou, who is a professor at Frederick University in Cyprus. And together with Bill Ayers, Lucy Avramidou, and Katie Klender, they conducted a project called Cyprus Oral History. project. And I came across an interview that she conducted with a Turkish Cypriot lady called Bokra Sawa. And I wanted to share this with you because she speaks, she raises this topic of the position of Cyprus in the Mediterranean, and not only its culture, but also the political impact of its geographical location. So Violeta, if you could play that for us.
And our children and grandchildren will live in a better condition, because Cyprus is a very beautiful island. We love our island, we love our country, both Greek Cypriots and Turkish Cypriots. We have a lot of common ways. We love kebab, souvlaki, we love baklava and coffee, and we like dancing, music. We have the similar dances, music, etc. So we can manage to share this beautiful island. And it is not the problem of tightness. It can fit all of us, actually. But mainly it is, again, an international problem. Unfortunately, the geographic place is a handicap for us. If, for example, recently there was a very interesting art exhibition, and one of our artists imagined Cyprus in a very distinct part of ocean. So if it was there, how our lives would be. Nobody could know us, and nobody would care what we were doing here. So I think it is up to the Cypriots to come together and work together to have a big future, better future for all of us. Another obstacle is that people do not foresee the future very much. The person I remember in this bicommunal work who foresee the problem very well was Lordos, Father Lordos. I was in one of the conferences of the businessmen associations, and he was one of the speakers, and he was saying that, well, we have to use the power of money and trade to solve this problem, because money doesn't have a nationality and it doesn't consider any barrier. So if we learn to gain from each other, it will be also a tool for us to reach to peace. And I remember one of the another Greek.
I was very excited to come across this project because there are several interviews that were conducted about the events of 74, but also beforehand, because the history of Cyprus is quite contested. And as I was saying before, the location, geographical location of Cyprus as a middle point between the continents of Africa, Europe, also it's right next to the Middle East, Syria. It enriches our culture. Simultaneously, we've taken a lot from the Turkish culture. There's been an exchange. It's just, well, with the political developments now, somehow ignored by many. But funnily enough, this interview was conducted in 2012, but the events that she recounts are much earlier. But she still, already then, there was an interest in profiting from the land, in coming together, the Turkish Cypriots and the Greek Cypriots, in order to, let's say, make the most of what they have in terms of natural, in terms of the country and its assets and the coast, and making an investment and building on the trade. So I think it's a position that Cyprus has accepted and actually embraced. And it's going full force with the development projects now in terms of real estate developments. The port of Limassol is actually one of the most important ports in Limassol, in Europe. I think, considering its size, it's like the third or fourth most efficient port, considering its size and the output that it produces. So yes, it's an interesting place with many paradoxes. And although Limassol is thriving, let's say thriving in maybe in quotations, the cultural scene in Nicosia, at the center of Cyprus, which is far away from the shore, was much more vibrant for many years. Now Limassol is slowly trying to pick up. Mm-hmm. But the art scene in Nicosia has been interesting for many years now, and there have been more spaces opened and run by artists or project spaces. There is an exhibition that happens every now and then in NIMAC, which is the Nicosia Municipality Arts Center, which brings together artists from the region of the Mediterranean, which acknowledges this central position of Cyprus and a connection between all these countries, all these cultures. So, yeah.
Well, really interesting. We have also a second program to make, as Mayssa have said, because there are a lot of questions that we have to develop. But I think and I have feel that the audios and the listening that you bring, and also the lights that you bring, make me think, oh, maybe I'm an artist, that I'm working with this trade and these money conflicts, and how I can embrace it and also have resilience and resistance to that. Mm-hmm. It's a kind of conflict, mm-hmm. But I also think that the conflict is it maybe has happened in the Mediterranean Sea, mm-hmm. That is not like an idealized dream beach place as we can be sold like this, but it's not really like that. So it's like embrace reality and how to deal with that. And also have this woman said something about power, mm-hmm. And it's really interesting, mm-hmm. because she's asking if she has really power or she's not. Mm-hmm. And it's like, maybe we have power.
It's an important question mark at the end.
At the end.
Yeah.
This question of power or empowerment, I feel is quite relevant to the Mediterranean, because it, on one hand, it is it feels like it is an empowering characteristic of Mediterranean, the sea shoreline, but it's also can be quite crippling, and we're really forgetting about I think not forgetting, but maybe not talking about a very important side, which is migration, mm-hmm. or the lack of. Again, maybe for the other Taula, I think it will be another really Taula. Large topics. Yeah. Mm-hmm. But it's important to note that the Mediterranean, one of the characteristics of the Mediterranean, is really this exchange. Mm-hmm. And here we are talking about different cities and countries that are sharing the same sea, but really are not talking to each other. Mm-hmm. And I find this quite present also in Barcelona. And it was extremely refreshing for me to see what Jiser is up to with these triangles that you create with Marseille and Tunis and Algiers, and I think it's really important to reflect on this a lot more and perhaps trigger and empower such initiatives to happen.
Yes, of course. And well, for that Taula, that because I was thinking all the time in that you have said, where is migration in this? What is migration in this Taula? But I think we have talked like hiding it in a way of why tourists is in that question. Why tourists are coming or going or traveling, what merchandisers are traveling, and why people is not
Yeah,
traveling.
but I think, I'm sorry, I mean, I'm interrupting. I think like in Beirut, what is happening also, it is a lot of laundering. Laundering meaning washing money, and therefore there is an incredible kind of outburst of buildings and high scrapers and all that. And here there's a laundering through tourism of our minds, that we keep looking at the sea as something that we can have leisure and all that, and we forget how many corpses are beyond, under. And then I think this is part of the big problems we have all the time. So whenever you want to put this up front, you're treated either as a humanitarian or as someone who, you're pessimistic and so on, so on, so on. But in fact, I mean, we are building our borders all more and more farther away from what it is, these sites. We need to protect our sites. Egypt would like to do the same. Egypt with Scandaria and Cyprus and Malta, and
moving as far
as possible. So whoever comes there, they have only no problems. So this is a big issue.
Yep. Yes, absolutely.
We have been talking about walls, internal walls in the city, but also at a larger scale in the Mediterranean. That the laws are getting more and more restrictive and aggressive. So we try to approach or to get closer to the people living here in Barcelona, and also giving opportunities to others to discover or to merge in other places. So. Keep going.
So yes, thank you very much for that.
Thanks, shukran Mayssa.
Thank you very
so
much.
I want to thank you to Ràdio Fabra and Christian, which is here. He's a sound designer, which is here with us. To Tony, to Denise, to Mayssa, also
to
Santi, which is making the photographs. That's what it's sounding all the
to the fan, our guest.
Yes,
but it's good.
Many thanks to the fan.
Also Xavi, and we can't forget
Thank you so much.
the fan, and we have public also. You have been listening all the time.
Yes.
So thank you for the public. That's the real public. He's not in the beach. He's here. That's okay.
Sweating with us.
Sweating with us. So I will finish with this this audio. This is it comes for this triangle that Mayssa was telling, that has been in Marsella with the Jiser project and Bokra Sawa project, and Alexandria. Do you remember the
Al Medina
in Alexandria?
So
there were 3 cities. People from abroad, around the world, not just locals, and we made with Maite Rodríguez a collaboration, and we have take all these listeners about the city. We have been drawing, we have been recording, and we have one that is close to the city, but at the same time is in between. It's called Rock City, and if you wanna listen, it's here. Bye.
Ça me rappelle le port de Valparaiso avec les bateaux de pêcheurs.
Mas não são.
E se fossin un sabor?
Curioso. O vento.
J'entends le bruit de l'eau, les oiseaux, un bateau au loin, c'est un son en bord de mer.
Salat segur, no només per estar al costat del mar.
Mas não estou.